Hello and welcome to the very last episode of the home buying process. Today we're talking about the closing day, what you as the home buyer can expect on the day when you officially become a homeowner. Before we get started, if you happen to be new here, my name is Eric Schweenarn. I'm a realtor with Hometown Realtors in Massachusetts. If you've been following along with the home buying process, or if you've watched any of my other videos and you like the content that I'm creating, please consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on future content coming very soon. And as always, feel free to follow me on Facebook or Instagram at ESC Realtor. Let's get right into it. To get started, let's talk about the final walkthrough, which we mentioned in the last video, the clear to close video. On the morning of your closing day is when you should have your final walkthrough. Now, the final walkthrough doesn't have to be done on your actual closing day. If your schedule doesn't allow it, it is okay to do the final walkthrough ahead of time, like a day or two before closing. However, I would caution you as a home buyer not to do that. If it's at all possible, I would have the final walkthrough the day of closing. The reason for that is because once you go to closing and you sign all the paperwork, you are accepting the property in whatever condition it is. Now, let's just say hypothetically, you have your final walkthrough the night before. That night there's a really bad windstorm, a branch comes down, hits the roof, causes damage. You don't know because you don't go to the property for your final walkthrough. You find out later that evening after you've signed all the paperwork. Now you kind of own the damage because unfortunately you signed the paperwork saying that you're accepting the property in its current condition. So it's very important, if at all possible, have the final walkthrough the day of closing because you're protecting yourself to make sure that the home is in the proper condition it should be at the time you take ownership. It's also your opportunity as a home buyer to make sure that the seller did all of the parts of the contract that they are required to do. For instance, if you had any repairs that came up during your home inspection that you negotiated with the seller, the final walkthrough is your opportunity to go through and make sure that those things have been done. Lastly, as a home buyer, it's your opportunity to make sure that the seller is actually going to be out of the property and the property is going to be clear of all personal items. I mention this because I have seen this happen way too frequently where the seller either doesn't know that they have to be out on the day of closing and is therefore unready to be out of the home, or they just leave items behind that they think a home buyer will want. The final walkthrough is your opportunity to say, hey, are these items going to be taken out of the home? Because these are not personal property items that I want left behind. If you have the final walkthrough and everything checks out, then it is time to move on to the closing. Somewhere around the morning of closing, you should get a document from the closing attorney that has your finalized numbers. And part of those finalized numbers are going to be some money that you as a home buyer are going to have to pay. They're referred to as adjustments. When you do go to closing, you probably will have to bring one or sometimes a couple of different checks for the seller to make up for some of these common adjustments. Some of the more common adjustments include things such as the property taxes on the home itself. Depending on what day of the month you're closing on the home will depend on how much prorated taxes are due. If the seller has paid taxes in advance, then there may be a portion of the month's worth of property taxes due that you as the home buyer have to reimburse to the seller who's already paid them. And in addition, there are other things such as the heating fuel oil or propane or whatever type of heating fuel the home itself uses. You are probably going to have to reimburse the seller the cost of that heating fuel. Here's what you as the home buyer need to bring to closing. Number one, you need to bring a valid photo identification. And this is very important. Note the fact that I said a valid. Make sure that whatever identification you're bringing to closing is not expired. If you bring an expired license to a closing, you will not be closing. You have to have a valid, current form of identification that you need to bring with you to closing. Number two, you need to make sure that you're bringing one, if not two checks to closing. The amounts, who to make them payable to, and whether or not it needs to be a certified bank check or a personal check, all that information will be relayed to you ahead of closing by the closing attorney. You just have to make sure that you physically go get them and bring them with you to the closing table. Number 3, you just got to be ready to sign a lot of paperwork. Depending again on what type of loan that you're using, because each type of loan has a different amount of paperwork, but generally speaking, the government type loans, especially those for first-time home buyers, so FHA, VA, USDA, they have a lot of paperwork. You are going to be signing a lot of documents. So just be prepared to spend some time signing a lot of places, even duplicates of a lot of things. You're gonna be doing a lot of signing at closing. But on the positive note, once everything is signed, you will then be given the keys to the home so that at that point, you can now go to the home. You can move in, you can check it out, you can do whatever you want. You are not technically the homeowner until the deed gets recorded with the Registry of Deeds. It usually only takes about an hour or two after closing before it's recorded. Your real estate professional will let you know when everything's on record. Likewise, the closing attorney will also reach out to you to let you know that everything is on record, you're a homeowner. And that concludes the home buying process. If you've stuck with me through all the videos in this series, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate the support. More than that, I really hope that people found this information valuable. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or an experienced buyer, I hope that you gained something from watching these videos. If you have any further questions, comments, anything, feel free to drop them below, or again, find me on Facebook or Instagram at ESC Realtor. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.